My friend Jack the Marine once said that he had wanted so badly to be one of those people who knew, while everybody else was running around in circles, exactly what to do, that he became one of them. And now he knows those people only feel alive when there's a crisis running, pay terrible prices when it's over. Whirlpool isn't Whirlpool unless it has a hole at center. But a hole isn't anything at all without a whirlpool. Lucretius was right. All there is atoms and void. The still point at the center that refuses and refutes connection is void. We're sitting in our armchairs, feet up, blankets over legs, watching a DVR on TV. And when it ended and I deleted it, the cable box defaulted to Americana music. John Fogerty singing, "Don't You Wish It Was True?" And simultaneously, Carol's toes and mine started tapping. Well, not really tapping. There was nothing actually to tap against, just wiggling the blankets. Carol noticed the synchronism before I did and said, "This is how old people dance." And we both laughed. Even though it wasn't the least bit funny, we had a good laugh. Both of us together. Places early and get a table by myself. I always hope a beautiful woman will come and take the chair next to me. And sometimes when the room is filled up, a beautiful woman will come and put her hand on one of the other chairs and ask, "Is anyone sitting here?" And speechless, I'll just gesture with open palm. And she will take the chair, literally, and carry it to another table where her friend was sitting. I said, "Penthouse apartment, every convenience, and you don't have a garbage disposal?" My friend said, "They're not allowed in Manhattan." I didn't think it needed explanation, population density, antiquated infrastructure, but he went on. "Maybe it's an urban legend, but they say it's because they could be used to get rid of bodies." They say it would take about 9 hours with the cutting up and feeding in one piece at a time, but theoretically you'd have the perfect crime. Yeah, it probably is an urban legend. When I think about the day the college boy was mocking the homeless man on the bus, I'm glad we don't have that restriction here. Or those two classmates of mine at our 50th, one asking the other, "Is that an Hermes tie?" The H so exquisitely silent, and each of them is pleased with the other as with himself. I tried to be happy for their success, really tried, but half my mind was thinking, that's why I take notes at poetry. 11. When you're listening to 20 or 30 poets in a row, it's hard to give them each the kind of attention they deserve. The simple act of writing name and title helps punctuate, like a series of locks on an English river. 10. I'm sending signals to myself that something worth remembering for the rest of my life may be about to happen in the next 3 to 5 minutes. My note is a pin for fixing that butterfly in my memory. 9. I get poem ideas from other people. That isn't plagiarism, it's homage. 8. Sometimes I write down a really effective line so that I might consider it later, figure out what it was I liked about it, try to do more of that in my own work. Or maybe someday when I'm 1,000 miles away, I'll just steal the line. That's plagiarism. Once they find out about it, then it becomes homage. Sometimes I mishear a phrase and think it would be very interesting to combine what I thought I heard with what was actually said. 6. If the cops hauled you in and asked you where you were on the night of March 22nd, 2004, between 9 and 11, you could pull your cards out and say, "I was in Bellingham watching Karen Finney Park. She was awesome. She did haiku, she did Butterfly House, she got an encore. The only thing she didn't do was the orgasm part." And the bad cop will tell you not to leave town, but his heart won't be in it. 5. But suppose you're doing 3 to 5 in a place of stand-up guys and you can't get to poetry readings anymore. You have your wife bake your note cards into a cake and bring the cake in on the Saturday closest to your birthday. And you recover the cards and wipe the chocolate from them lovingly and sit on your bunk and relive these nights when you were as free as your verse. Or maybe the day comes when the fabric of the state has been by lies stretched so very thin that it cannot support the weight even of one poet telling the truth in public, and they outlaw gatherings like this. 3. And in any event, the day will come when I can't get out to poetry anymore. Maybe you won't be able to afford a car or gas. Maybe it'll be the nursing home my daughter started threatening me with when she was 8. I hope it's not my eyes that go, but maybe I'd get someone to read my cards to me, and they'd ask me, what was Mike McGee like? And I'd try to describe Mike, how he looked like he should be carrying a war axe and bickering with us all over Rivendell. I was brilliant and hilarious, sometimes at the same time, and he liked pudding and running made him sad. Eventually I'd run out of gas, knowing I hadn't even scratched the surface of Mike McGee. 2. You don't always get the chance that night to tell someone how much you like their stuff. Then when you see them 3 weeks later, you can't remember what it was you liked. And it defeats the purpose to say, I really admired that unmemorable poem. Whatever your name is. 1. But mostly my note cards are evidence that I was here, alive and paying attention. There's a poet named Marita O'Neill from Portland, Maine, who talks about when a dog barks, sometimes all they're saying is, I'm a dog, I'm here. These note cards are my way of saying, I'm Jack, and I was here.
Yeah.
Woof! Shelves. One whole day my college roommate Hobson walked around chanting the phone number to himself. At 7 o'clock he would need it on the tip of his tongue, and no mistake. 7 came, and all went smoothly. But later that same evening, Hobson had to call his lifelong home, and could not remember the number there. Our other roommate, Spring, pre-med, said, Bill, you see what this implies. Your brain is saturated. From now on, everything you learn will force out something the same size, and it's completely random. If I were you, I'd do some soul searching before continuing my education. Even one music class. You might never make it back to the room. If that should happen, God forbid, can I have your stuff? It really works something like that. Why is it we can all remember the names of the kids in our 3rd grade class? I think it's because we were just beginning to stock the cavernous warehouse of memory. And we knew no better than to fill the front shelves first and loot whatever came to hand. I ran this theory by my wife, and she said, her stuff never makes it to the shelves. Her stuff is all in boxes on the floor. I thought about all this at a family wake a while back when I recognized my Uncle Mike, my grandfather's brother. I had thought he was dead years ago. His son told me he didn't know what day it was. He never does anymore. But why does he need to? It had to be painstakingly explained to Mike who I was. Once he had me placed in his lattice of recallable relationships, I was able to sit with him and pick his brain of treasures I had thought irretrievably lost. He played 3rd base and shortstop, just like me. Graduated from Boston Latin, like my daughters. He remembers the first time he ever saw my grandmother. She was wearing a raccoon coat, and he thought, that's the best looking woman I've ever seen. Grandma? He says the best job he ever had was in City Hall, running an office, where he booked the occasional wager on the side. He can still remember the number of the bookie in the North End he would phone his bets in too. I made a date to sit with Mike again. Next time I'll bring a notebook and a tape deck to rescue the old stories for myself, for my daughters, maybe someday for their kids. Was my grandfather a good ball player? Did my great-grandfather have a temper that got him into trouble? Did he love his kids? And did he let them know it? Were the McCarthy women always strong? The men good-looking? I know when I sit with Mike again, it would have to be painstakingly explain to him who I am. The shelves of his memory are full. The contents irreplaceable. They should not make way for things unneeded, obvious, or self-explanatory. I want to be Jesus. I wouldn't mind doing a miracle here and there. I even suspect I could do a lot better than walking on water, water into wine. As Jesus, I'd have no problem with the cool sayings. Hey, if I knew they'd still be quoting me 2,000 years later, if I knew I had people following me around, memorizing everything I said, I could come up with some real quotables. Just substitute Republicans for Pharisees, and I'd be halfway home already. Walking town to town with a gang of friends who idolize me, I could hack that. I know how when a bunch of guys get together in some desperate enterprise, a strange chemistry happens and everybody's sense of humor gets sharpened. And if we survive, we remember those parts of our lives as much for the laughter as for the desperation. How would I feel about some woman washing my feet with her hair? I might say, darling, that's a little over the top. But on balance, that would not be the deal breaker. Turning the other cheek would be hard for me, but I think I could do it if I was really sure it was the right thing, and I think Jesus was that sure. It would take a lot of pressure off just knowing you don't have to maintain that difficult facade of, yeah, I am your tender, sensitive poetry guy, but at the same time, I'm Irish and don't fuck with me. The reason I didn't want to be Jesus, you probably think this is going to turn into a meditation on the crucifixion. And okay, crucifixion is not something I would look forward to. Just one day. I'd be more afraid of it if they were torturing me to get me to betray my friends, because I know that in the end, I would betray my friends, and that would be the worst part. But they were torturing Jesus just for sport, and put it in perspective. We hear about more imaginative torture than that every night of the week on TVs. Senate hearings, extraordinary rendition, Guantanamo, waterboarding. Would I have said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do? For me, that would be a real stretch. But the hardest thing of all would be the taunting. When they started talking shit like, if you really are the Son of God, come down from the cross, blah, blah, blah. I don't think I could resist the impulse to rip the nails out of my hands and feet and hop lightly to the ground and say, you want me? You got me, bitch! No resurrection, no Christianity, just squander everything on one great, misdirected, crowd-pleasing punchline. The whole, complete, total, entire reason I wouldn't want to be Jesus, the deal breaker to end all deal breakers, is all the subsequent centuries sitting at the right hand of the Father and weeping at all the inhumanities, the atrocities, abuses being committed in my name. If I were Jesus, I would never stop crying, even in heaven, at all the shit going down every day in my name. Never stop repeating over and over to the end of time and beyond, better I never came. Better I never came. But a man's got to try. Working with young writers is to give them the subject, My Mother's Kitchen. And I realized recently that I had actually never written my own poem about that. And if you've never done it, I recommend it. It's you'd be surprised what comes out. I remember the home-bottled root beer aging under the kitchen sink. Sometimes the bottles exploded. I remember the waffle iron that once in a while made waffles, far more often grilled cheese sandwiches. The highlight was the melted cheese that always squeezed out of the sandwich and hardened about the margins and had to be chipped off with a butter knife. Yum. I don't remember ever seeing salad. I remember never having brownies. My mother made great Toll House cookies, the classic kind with walnuts. But when she attempted brownies, what came out was always brownie pudding. I heard that can be caused by confusing baking powder and baking soda, but I don't know if that's true. And anyway, what's not to like about brownie pudding? Mum, spelled with an O, pronounced with a U. Mum liked cats and raised collies. 3 of the collies made themselves indispensable emotionally, house pets, as permanent as any of us. In the last little 2-year window between the TV stand and the accident, she had a horse, too. The horse, fortunately, had no presence in her kitchen. But the bowls and water dishes of the cats and collies pretty much lined the floor along the wall between the refrigerator and the sink. I don't have much memory of smells, except for the dog food, when I'd be the one who had to prepare it. The cereal smell of the Casco, fleshy, greasy smell of the horse meat we would mix with it, our sleeves rolled up and hands deep in the big red bowl. It actually smelled pretty good. The picture window in the breakfast nook. Dad loved to tell the story of sitting there with a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning after we moved from Dorchester, having gotten up extra early because he had no idea how insanely long it might take him to get into Boston from there, and seeing out back in the big split rail fenced pasture, which he already envisioned as a baseball field, a deer. I don't think we ever saw another. The breakfast nook was where we took all our meals, like a booth in a restaurant. Mom and Dad on one bench, 3 kids facing, the 4th on a chair at the end that opened on the kitchen. Dad and I had the window seats. My brother and my sisters, I'm not sure I ever noticed who sat where. I tell myself that everybody's self-absorbed at that age, but I bet they remember. I didn't much like mealtime except for dessert. Not that there was anything unpleasant about it, except that Mom often tried to badger us into conversations, just always someplace else I'd rather be. I remember my father once looking at me wonderingly and saying, "You really would rather play baseball than eat, wouldn't you?" And me being surprised, he was surprised. I thought anybody in their right mind would rather play baseball than eat. Meals to me were a necessary interruption, like pit stops to a NASCAR driver. And I don't think my siblings were any different. Preparing food for that utterly unappreciative lot cannot have been the highlight of a bright woman's day. Maybe that explains Sunday mornings and bacon and eggs for the dogs, who always knew when it was Sunday and were never as happy to see us as coming back from Mass, and it had nothing to do with our presumed state of grace. I don't remember that the cats ever got anything special, though there was one that loved potato chips, another one baked beans. Graham always discouraged us feeding the ladder to the ladder. I thought then that she was being unnecessarily mean. Understand better now. That cat liked to sit on Graham's lap. I remember coming home from Exeter on weekends that began after 11:10 class Saturday morning, ended Sunday night at 8 p.m. check-in. Dad would pick me up at North Station from the train and drive me home to Hingham, and Mom would have scallops and French fries, maybe the only 2 foods I actually did like, on the table when I got there. 24 hours later, I'd be on my way back to the station with dog hair all over my clothes and probably in my overnight bag a tin of her Toll House cookies. I remember back before the collies, the time my father brought home a dog given him by someone, probably a drunk that he was working with, whose wife had just kicked him out and said, "And take your goddamn dog with you." And it was a full-grown St. Bernard. A sweetheart of a dog, maybe bigger than any 2 of us kids put together, and we adored it on sight. My mother was iffy. Right up to the moment the St. Bernard shambled into the kitchen the next morning and over to the stove and looked into the pot, looked down into the pot to see what was cooking. And instantly Mom said, "He's too big, he has to go." Because this was, after all, my mother's kitchen. There's a new world somewhere they call the Promised Land, and I'll be there someday if you will hold my hand. Summer of '65, I had just finished my first year back at Dartmouth after 5 years out, disease 3, recovery 2. I had wangled one of the best summer jobs on campus, resident tutor in the ABC program. As part of our orientation, the 8 of us tutors were on a camping trip. I still need you there beside me, no matter what I do, for I know I'll never find another you. 2 tutors liked to play their guitars and sing together, and they were good. I years later bought an album that it turned out they were on. They were just learning this song, which I guess was very popular. There wasn't much radio reception in the Upper Valley. Most of us didn't even have one in our rooms. I loved the song the first time Tom Mitchell and Dan Thompson sang it for us. Loved it with a passion that always seemed inordinate, until today. There is always someone for each of us, they say, and you'll be my someone forever and a day. I know those guys played other songs on that trip, and I know that when they did, I felt cheated. But all I really remember of those days and nights is bugs and sweat and snatches of that one song running through my head. It's a long, long journey, so stay by my side. When I walk through the dark, you'll be my guide. In '65, I had a girlfriend and we were pretty serious. But she was off to Europe and I wasn't going to see her all summer. And it doesn't seem to me that she was in my mind when I would sing to myself whatever verses of that song I could remember. It wasn't any one person I was in love with. It was the idea itself of love. A young man's idea of being in love, of me being in love. I could search the whole world over until my life is through, but I know I'll never find another you. Now, I've always believed that in life there are these peak moments such that forever after you have total recall of everything you were thinking, feeling at those milestones, because you knew those moments to be important. Your wedding, the birth of your first child, death of a parent. But there are also these other random moments, just as perfectly preserved, seemingly secured in memory by nothing weightier than their association with a song you hear every year or two. Call it the soundtrack of your life phenomenon. It's a long, long journey, so stay by my side. When I walk through the storm, you'll be my guide. You were on one side of America, I the other. It would be a quarter century, 3 busted marriages and 4 bruised but remarkably unbroken kids between us before our searches connected, beating odds prohibitive from any rational perspective. If they gave me a fortune, my pleasure would be small. I could lose it all tomorrow and never mind at all. Now here we sit, you and I, 40 plus years later, 3,000 miles from the White Mountains. It has been a long, long journey. We're back not listening to much radio, but now we have a laptop and this new iPod thing, and bit by bit I've been recording the cream of my old 45s onto my laptop. Scratchy, yes, but still better than anything sounded on AM radio in the Upper Valley in 1965. And from the laptop to this iPod,